Writer's Block, Super Friends, proudly presented by Brondo Energy Drink. It's like a monster truck you can pour into your face. Brondo, the Thirst Mutilator. I am Rylend Grant, screenwriter, Ringo Award-winning creator of fine comics like Aberrant, Banjax, and The Jump. The other voice in the dark, the man in the box to the left is...
David Avallone, film guy, comic book writer, drunken reprobate.
Love it, love it, love it. If you missed any of our previous conversations episodes featuring comic luminaries like David F. Walker, Matt Fraction, Stan Sakai, Kevin Eastman, Cecil Castellucci, and Alex DeCampi, and many, many more, our entire catalog can be celebrated via YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and other purveyors of worthwhile ear cracks. So double on back and check it all out. But we have a great show for you today. Avallone, why don't we bring our guests on?
Bringing in the lovely and talented Susan Eisenberg and the lovely and talented Phil Lamarr.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello, kids.
Hello.
So,
that, you know, the way that you introduce the podcast is the way I always say hello to I greet my father every phone call.
I'm sure
that loudly?
No, I take it down about... No, it's not that loudly, but it's that kind of hello. So it was like kind of sweet when I heard you say it like that.
That's good. That's a great story. We've debated whether we should warn people or not that I'm going to yell. And we started out doing that, but we thought it was maybe a little bit more fun not to. And you know, for some people it just kind of rolls off of them, and then some people like we pop onto the screen and they're like, whoa. So those are.
For me, it was just totally familiar. So I loved it. Thank you.
We've never had that response. So awesome.
Well, Susan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, so Susan Eisenberg, and voice actor, probably best known for voicing Wonder Woman in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, which is how I know that guy sitting next to me. And, you know, just all around voiceover person. Loved the voiceover world, loved doing audiobooks and promos and cartoons and all of it. It's just all good as far as I'm concerned.
Lovely. And Philip Lamarr.
Hey, Phil Lamarr. Face actor, voice actor, foot actor, all the kinds.
Oh, wow.
Hand model. He does it all.
No, that's the one that I don't do because I bite my nails.
Okay.
TikTok phenomenon, OnlyFans.
Oh God.
None of those.
No,
things.
I'm allergic to the internet, but I'm here for you, David.
I appreciate that, especially considering that many, many moons ago, I believe we met on the internet through the kind offices of Jay Kogan and the a small cult known as the Stump, which dare not speak its name in public. But I get, you know, to start with the first softball kind of question, this show is usually about people who create comic books, and I thought we were overdue to have some, you know, actual superheroes on because we haven't done that yet. But I'm always curious. Were you familiar with, did you read, were you a fan of any of the characters you voiced before you voiced them? Either one of you can take it first. Susan, you want to? You know,
I was a fan of Linda Carter, but I didn't know too much about Wonder Woman. I didn't grow up with, I grew up with Archie comics and a few others. I watched Scooby-Dooby-Doo and all of that, but I wasn't a huge cartoon comic book fan. So I kind of learned on the job, if you will. But I knew Linda Carter's work because she made such an indelible imprint on the culture. But I can't say I watched Super Friends or any of that, which is probably good because I wasn't like intimidated by what came before me that much. And Linda is Linda. She's singular. So no one has to try to be her. No one can. So I kind of had it was just a blank slate, if you will. And then Bruce Timm and Andrea Romano could fill in what they wanted it to be. And I tried to deliver as best I could.
And indeed you have for a while now. It's a great take on the character. Phil, how about you?
Well, I grew up a big comic book geek. So yeah, I knew all those characters backwards and forwards. And in fact, I was in some ways sort of the acting department R&D guy, because a lot of times there would be guest actors coming in to play some relatively obscure DC character, and I would reach in my bags like, actually, hold on a second. I've got here are this, the 7 Soldiers of Victory, and you're this one.
Yeah, because most of us didn't have any clue. Even the main stars didn't have a clue about that world. And I always say, Phil was the guy that was on the floor reading comic books in between takes, and he was our go-to guy, and because he knew that world, and not just knew it, but like knew it well. Sure. And so you had a question, it was like 1-800-Phil, that kind of thing. He knew the answer.
Well, the truth of the matter is, knowing it doesn't necessarily make you better at it, especially from an acting standpoint. And I think the same is true of a writing standpoint. Although I don't know. Actually, I guess it's arguable whether the golden age, which was of comics, was created by guys who did not read comics,
right,
and largely didn't even respect the medium,
right.
They still created things that we all soaked into our bones,
right.
And obviously, from Roy Thomas on, from the second gen, nerd creators, there are obviously still great things, but I think you get the same percentage of greatness. Whether somebody is a fan or not.
Sure.
Well, it seems like you need to know enough, right? Like you need to know just enough. Like if you know too much, it could trip you up. Not to say that it's always going to trip you up, right? But if you are filtering your performance, your take on things through all of these other takes, right? Maybe that there's not enough room for it, right? You want room for your own take, for your own stuff, right? And I've seen this play out just as a writer. Like a lot of my film, TV stuff, I write with a partner, and we've done a lot of rewrite things. And sometimes we'll get very busy, and I'm working on one thing, and he's working on the other. And if you're rewriting something, it can be a blessing or a curse to have kind of read the original too much. You know what I'm saying? Right. If you have this completely different take on things. And so we have done this thing from time to time where he reads the original, becomes extremely, he knows it backwards and forwards, and then he does a rewrite on it and comes up with something completely different that is really informed by the original. I wait and don't read the original until later. I read his script first, and then I'm looking at it as completely new, which will become our script as a completely new thing, and then I'm coming at it from a completely different angle. So it's like it's interesting, I think that the truth, we're lucky in that there are 2 of us, right? But the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, where it's like you need to know enough, but you don't want to know so much that it kind of gets in your way, I guess.
Well, actually, I think it's just about talent.
Yeah.
If you have the talent to do that thing, whether you're a fan or whether you're not, really doesn't matter, because you're going to find the thing that makes an audience respond. The people who don't have talent, who are just fans and just want to write because I love writing, then you're not creating a new comic. You're writing fan fiction.
Yeah, sure.
And that stuff is always kind of apparent. And there is definitely that danger when you're so deep into something, what you're obsessed with about it is not necessarily what anyone else is obsessed with about it. And you may be like, I'm going to focus on this one panel in this one comic from my childhood and really go deep into what we learned right then and there. And it's like, no, does everybody care about that though? That's, and an adaptation and, this field particularly is all about like, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Though I think, had anyone voiced Green Lantern before? Had anyone voiced John Stewart before you came along?
No. No.
I
I think there had been Hal Jordan had probably shown up in some Super Friends episodes.
Yeah.
But I was luckier than you, Susan. I mean, because you did have, in some way, this idea but it wasn't in the same realm. And more importantly, the people we were working for weren't tied to that. They weren't trying to make Susan listen to tapes of Linda Carter. It's like, make sure you get some of this in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank God.
No, and there are a number of interesting ways to do that. I mean, I was impressed with the way that, as an example, Chris Pine didn't do a William Shatner impression at all, but there's something about Shatner's physicality.
It was enough of it. Yeah, there was enough of it. Yeah,
he sort of knows how William Shatner walks across a room, and he actually brought that rather than watch some of the bridge scenes in the movies, and you kind of like the way he gets in the chair is very William Shatner more than anything else.
And that one was so difficult because it's so
indelible.
Shatner as Kirk is, I mean, to a certain degree, it's like a parody of itself. You know what I'm saying? And it's been parodied so much that there are these things that are blown up. I mean, what I compare that to is like no one can ever do an original Christopher Walken impersonation anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like Jay Moore did his, and now every Christopher Walken impersonation is an impersonation of Jay Moore doing. You know, Christopher Walken, and there's one Harry Carey. Will Ferrell did Harry Carey. You can never do a new Harry Carey. And so if someone came to one of us and said, "Hey, we want you to play Harry Carey in this thing," it would be hard to get away from that. And the James Kirk thing was a difficult one. And
well, actually, I'd be curious whether Chris Pine, the thing that you're talking about, David, whether he actually made that choice, or whether he simply got into a captain's chair on a spaceship the way anybody would get into the captain's chair on a spaceship, and you read Shatner into it.
That is possible, but no, I did read an interview with him once where he said, I tried to be him without doing that impression.
Okay, so he was conscious of it. Okay.
He's like, he talks a lot about how Shatner, as a stage actor, there's something about the way he moves and poses and strikes attitudes, and he's like, I wanted to do that part and not do the voice because I felt like that was enough to sell the Kirkness of it. There's one moment in the first movie where it goes bones, and you're like, there it is. like you had to start a line of dialogue with bones, and there was really no way into it that wasn't Shatnerian in its way. But what Rylend was saying was reminding me the old, I'm sure you know the old George Carlin thing about people that everybody does impressions of. He's talking about doing the variety show host.
Oh, Sullivan. Ed Sullivan.
He's talking about doing Sullivan. He's like, I do the Don Biner Ed Sullivan. A lot of people do the Rich Little. I'm not a fan of the Rich Little. I think the Biner is more incisive and more, there's definitely Hank Azaria. I've never imagined there was a way to do a Charles Bronson impression. But he does it all the time on The Simpsons, and it's great. And you go, oh, that's the road in to the Charles Bronson impression, and that's always kind of that's always kind of interesting. But yeah, not having being in a place where you could create the characters as Bruce Timm, for example, rather than it being we're doing Diana Prince from 1979 and that's what we want. And there's a I would say Kevin is probably my favorite Batman of all of the Batmen there have ever been. There's no interpretation of that part that I think is superior.
I don't think you're alone in that. I think that, when they do these polls, which they love to do now, people are like, who's your favorite Batman? And they list all the live action guys, and people always say Kevin. And, put him on, add the VO guy because he's our Batman. I think most people have that connection to him.
The close second runner up for me isn't Michael Keaton, it's Dietrich Bader.
Oh,
he's one of the great comedy Batmen of all time. I don't know if you've watched the Harley Quinn series, but he does so much with an exhausted sigh. I love
really
that.
Good.
I love that version of the Batverse where everyone is a mess and Batman is actually the straight man to a city full of just complete fucking lunatics.
Yeah, that's pretty. Well, it's funny, Susan, what you were saying about Kevin being the iconic Batman. I mean, before Justice League, Batman was my comic book totem animal. That was my book. Mm-hmm. And then, but although weirdly, I didn't watch Batman the Animated Series. Wow. I think because of the age I was at that point.
Yeah.
I wasn't a kid when it came on. I was, a grown-up trying to, go out and go on dates. But getting to, work with Kevin, people, it's funny because there's two questions people ask, like, who is your favorite Batman? It's like, without a doubt, as someone who loves the character, nobody embodies all the things I love about the character. Kevin's voice sounds like Neil Adams' pen.
That's great.
That's great.
It captures everything that's cool about the character. All the stuff that goes back to 1939.
Right.
To now. And so, but then people say, now, if there was one character you would want to play, voice, what would it be? And of course, like, Batman is my totem. That is the one character. But then now I'm like, but I can't ever play Batman because all I could ever think to do is try to copy Kevin.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's actually similar to, like, every once in a while, Warner Brothers, because they have no respect for talent, will recast the Looney Tunes characters, like, every 3 years. Mm-hmm. I can't audition.
Yep.
Because anytime I do it and it doesn't sound exactly like Mel Blanc, I can't submit it. Nope. Delete.
Yeah. No, and that's a hard one too, because man, those personalities are so strong, and Blanc's work is so just absolutely. And I get it. Like, when he died, when Jim Henson died, giant corporations aren't going to go, well, Bugs Bunny and Kermit the Frog are dead.
Right.
I'm sorry, kids, but that's what happened. There's no going back. It's like they're definitely not going to do that, and
they shouldn't.
Like, no,
they shouldn't. Like, when Olivier died, we don't put away Hamlet.
Right.
We still need those characters. We still need those stories.
Right. But
we actors are just vessels for some period of time.
Yeah. But it's something with something like Bugs, it's just the voice is so indelible, and you really need someone who's got something. And, you guys know this better than anyone. It's not just the voice. It's everything else Blanc brought to that character. There's an inner life there that's really quite something. And
although there is something weird about people's response to oral stimulation, like AU oral. Like, I always say to people, like, when your parents call your name, like, you as a grown person, you flash back to when you were a child, even though they've obviously aged, their voices have aged, but you hear it the same way. It triggers the same synapses in your brain. And I think there's something about this voiceover work that we do. Because, like, when I hear Susan's Wonder Woman, it triggers a different response in me than someone else's Wonder Woman. It brings back all of the good feeling I had from those Justice League episodes. And I think that's, one of the reasons sometimes they will carry us along to, bring us back to revoice a character in a new thing, because they know, one, your performance as her is great, but it's also, hey, let's borrow a little bit of that,
totally
positive association.
Totally. No, it's, it's why I'm not a giant fan of needle drops in movies soundtracks, because so often I can't conjure this feeling on my own as a filmmaker, but I know if I play this pop song, you're going to feel a thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't even stop yourself from feeling this thing that I want you to feel because I played this song for you right now. And that's a valid thing to do. God knows. And it's why leitmotifs work in orchestral scores. Even people that aren't big film score nerds, when they hear the Force theme, they think about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and even if they don't know why they're thinking about Obi-Wan Kenobi, they hear dun 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 dun, dun and there's Alec Guinness and Ewan. There's no getting around it. So that use of sound and voices to borrow earlier greatness. I mean, look, it's why everyone put Orson Welles' voice in everything for the last 20 years of his life, because they just wanted, they wanted that Charles Foster Kane goodness coming out of every robot.
Tone of voice suggests greatness.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember he voiced the first trailer for Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and it was just such a no, this is so important, you guys. It's so important. We got Orson friggin' Welles. We're not just screwing around here. This isn't some Star Wars business,
Speaking of which, when you hear the old trailers, like for the 70s and 80s movies, oh man, does it take you back to that era? I mean, it's that guy who's, very serious talking about, I mean, he's so good that whoever that guy is, I don't even know who he is, but he did so many of the trailers, and it's just perfect for that era. Perfect. I mean, listen, let's just say it. Voiceover is where it's at, kids.
I mean, that's just so fascinating to me that it was I don't know the guy's name either, but he's the guy. We all know him as the guy, right? And every once in a while you would hear a trailer that didn't have the guy, and you'd be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah,
who's this? Are you kidding me?
If you trailer to Network?
Yeah.
Oh. Like that era, that guy. That's the one I'm talking about. And just he talks about the actors and, and it's long. It's a long trailer. And you're just riveted by it because this guy's so good.
If you want your mind blown, go to YouTube and look up the first Empire Strikes Back trailer. It took me decades to notice this. I don't know if he lost a bet with George Lucas, but it's Harrison Ford pretending to do an announcer trailer guy voice. But it's totally Harrison Ford. Luke Skywalker is back, but it's Harrison Ford saying it.
Awesome.
If you listen, you can kind of hear it.
Weird.
But he's trying super hard to sound like. I feel like he made a bet. Like he said, I bet I can sound like one of those guys. And Lucas was like,
guy.
You don't sound like any of those
Trailer
guys. But yeah.
Do you ever do trailers, Susan?
I have. For a couple of video games, I've done them. But, that's not my bread and butter, Phil. But I have done them. I'd like to say I think I've done everything. Now that I've done an audiobook, I think I've done it all.
What's the audiobook?
Star Trek Discovery.
What?
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sweet game.
Yeah. Yeah, except that again, not my world. And I don't know about you three, but pronouncing those names.
Romulan.
It was crazy. It was crazy, but it was fun.
I'm sure there are some tongue twisters in there.
Oh, totally.
Is there someone there to feed you pronunciations, or are you just kind of left to your own devices?
Well, it was a kind of a last minute gig, and truthfully, I don't even know how I got it because I didn't audition. I don't know how I got it to this day, but it came really quickly, and then they recorded really quickly, so they gave me this phonetic cheat sheet, and it was just crazy. But you figure it out as you go. Listen, with video games, a lot of times you don't see the script before you go into record, and so for the first time you're seeing it, you're seeing it on the screen, and and you just have to get it, and you just do.
Yeah. And is the video game thing? I can't even imagine those scripts. It's is it a lot of variations of the same actions and ideas and based on what the player has done?
I mean, I don't know about you, Susan, but I would say the vast majority of the time we never see a script.
Right.
Either for security reasons, they don't want or I think mostly it's just because of the process. Here are the in-game lines. These are the things you're going to say as we walk past this rock, and it'll be 9 different variations of that. Then there's the cinematic scenes. These are the scenes we've written that we think will go here, 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 and here, but maybe not.
Right.
You know, so there isn't a script in the broadest, in the, you know, the real technical sense of like, what is the story? What am I doing? Where am I saying? It's like half the stuff you record, they don't even know where it's going in the game.
Sure. I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
As
for
makes
your
it so
example,
difficult.
So it's we're walking past a rock. Don't touch that rock. That rock just exploded. He shouldn't have touched that rock. You know, like every possible throw that rock at a guy. Like every possible outcome of the rock encounter moment. That's got to be exhausting.
Well, luckily you usually have a writer and a director right there telling you, like, they'll give you some context. But it's for these games, they're so complex and there's so many characters, and they try to fill in some blanks, but it's like 4 blanks when you're talking about 3,000, pieces to this puzzle. But you just do your best. I mean, you try to take as much as you can that help you define the character. But I often say that you cannot go into a session for a video game not knowing what you're doing and try to fake your way through. I mean, some things you can try to fake your way through, not a video game session. There are too many things that you really do need to know. Trust me, I've tried. It hasn't ended well.
I mean, what's an example of something you would need to know? Do you mean about the character in the project or about the literal process of recording lines for a video game?
Well, yeah, and
go ahead, Seth.
No. I mean, what you were just saying, like, what are these lines for? Like, I think it helps to, if you've played games, it adds a layer of understanding, because you can look at something and go, oh, this is exposition to try to tell people how to do the buttons for the next thing they're about to encounter. So you at least understand the purpose of what you're saying from an intellectual standpoint, if not from a character standpoint. For me, the toughest thing, Susan, is always trying to ground things emotionally and make choices when you don't know specifics. So you end up a lot of times having to make general choices, which is why it's that acting in video games is not generally considered top-notch stuff. It's not the actors, it's the process.
You can't build an arc on the idea that maybe half the lines of dialogue that you recorded for a scene aren't actually going to be heard by the player because they may drop out because the guy didn't pick up the poker in the fireplace or whatever. So those 8 lines about picking up the poker in the fireplace that you had building to a climax of the scene, well, that's not happening now. So you can't just like jump to a different emotion. Suddenly. Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like you generally don't know where you're coming from and you don't know where you're going, right? And so how do you navigate any of that? But sometimes you don't even know where you are. So sometimes it's just
you just have to lean into character. It's like, okay, they tell you what the character is, they show you the character, but there's just that thing of if I'm talking about my day to my mom, I'm going to say that I'm going to describe the exact same things differently than I would, telling it to you, David, at a bar.
Right.
Even if the words I'm saying are the exact same, the way I say them is going to be different.
Right.
But if you don't know, like, okay, as an actor, you're wearing a black hood, and just tell the story to whom, where.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is always seemed super crazy challenging to me. I've had one voiceover gig in my life for someone's short film. They needed a Sean Connery impression, and the gag was that the character was named Roger Moore. That was it. That was the joke. It wasn't a terribly great short film, but I was kind of happy to be that anyone was paying for my Sean Connery impression. The one thing that I remember about it that was interesting was word choices. And I wonder if this ever, when you're doing a certain voice, certain word choices are harder than other word choices. And in this case, the Sean Connery character was issuing a warning about the bad guys wanted to destroy the world. And I was like, can I say planet? Because Sean saying world is a lot of damn world. Like I was like, I can do, he means to destroy the planet. That's easy.
Right.
You know, he means to destroy the world does not particularly come easily. Do you ever talk word choices with directors? Is it ever? I mean, I think it's different because you're not really doing impressions. It's not you're not locked into, you know, how someone particularly speaks. Is there
no, but
any?
you can trip. You can trip your there are certain, and this would happen a lot when we were doing Justice League, where you just keep doing that line. It's like the hill. You just keep, okay, I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to get it. And you're in a room full of people. Everyone's like, hello, and you just do it a few times. And it's really a tongue twister, and the writer's there and they're like, yeah, we can figure out another way to say it. Let's just change it up. Or they'll leave you and come back to you later just to give you a break. So you're not, because that pressure starts to mount, and we all have those words. Like for me, it's conscience. That's always tough for me to get out. And there are certain words that are just harder to say. And sometimes my New England accent will come in, and I'll hear it and I'll be like, yikes. Like instead of Themyscira, it's like, Rhode Island. It's like, what? No, that's not right. So, once in a while,
both are
that
great
happens.
for seafood, though. So there is that.
Yes,
both
indeed.
big great lobsters in Themyscira.
It's true.
Definitely.
It's true. So yeah, and sometimes, like in video games, I find they'll tweak things for you sometimes, which I appreciate. And actually, everything I've done, most of the time they won't, but once in a while you get what feels like a real collaboration, and they'll write to suit you, especially if it's a client that you've worked with a lot, whether it's in a video game or a commercial, and they'll know how you speak and the cadence you use, and they'll write that in, and that's a luxury, and it's pretty fabulous when it happens.
My dad wrote some spoken word albums in the 60s, late 50s. And he told me the story when I was a little boy about he had Claude Rains recorded a rewrite of Treasure Island for Children that Dad had written. And he said one of the highlights of his career was Claude Rains asking if it was okay to change a word that he had written. And it was a little bit about how it was about sound more than it was about content. The line ended pistol shot. And it was, talking about a flintlock. And he's like, I think pistol ball works better than pistol shot. He's like, I don't like shot. And Dad was like, great. Like, I'm not going to argue with Claude Rains about saying a word.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm going to get the hell out of the way.
Coming from the writer's end, I mean, it's such a gift to know who is going to deliver your lines. I mean, and particularly if that person is, gifted and you like them and they're going to bring something. I mean, I've done it before to a degree, but I'm right in the middle now of like my first like really kind of intense version of that. Doing this TV series now with Daveed Diggs and Rafael Casal and Emmy Raver Latman. It's three like amazing actors. And they're brilliant and they're awesome, and you hang out with them and you get to know their cadence, and you get to and you see the facial expressions they make, and you see like how they get excited and what makes them excited, and then when you can go in and you can craft the script to all of that, it just comes to life. I mean, it's like it's taking a script from like a 7 to an 11. I mean, it's awesome, and you can just like you're sitting there typing, and it's no longer this character you made up in your mind. Like you can hear Daveed saying the lines, you can see like Emmy laughing at that joke, you can see all of the stuff, and it becomes real in a very like meaningful way, and then when you hand the script off and they read it and it feels like them immediately, like that, like they respond to it. It's no longer like, oh, this is a good script. It's like, oh my God, this is us. Like, this is ours. This is You know, and so that's awesome. So, you know, I think that, yeah, I mean, that's like my dream scenario, I think.
Well, that's the magic of a collaborative medium like comics or animation or, you know, live action acting, is as the writer, you putting out the idea. I mean, I think as novelists, it's a different thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to use all the words I need to get the idea that's in my head onto this page so someone can read it with their eyes. I mean, it's a much simpler thing, but when you're dealing with, you know, actors performing things, they're bringing an energy to it. And sometimes it's alchemical, and that their energy plus that idea turns it into something, you know, I mean, it's funny because I'm working on a project now. We're trying to adapt a friend of mine's webcomic called Goblins into an animated series, and we crowdfunded money to do a trailer, and my partner Matt King and I, we're both actors, and we were writing our adaptation of the webcomic, and we spent months on it, and we acted out every scene, but then we did the record for the trailer, and to have Billy West and Maurice LaMarche and Jennifer Hale and Steve Bloom and Matthew Mercer in there taking these lines that we've said over and over and over again, and all of a sudden the words on the page became something else.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow, this scene is a thing that's alive now.
Yeah. And it's just the greatest experience in the world. I mean, of all of the things, I've done a lot of different things in show business, but a great actor reading words you wrote and them not merely getting it, but getting it better than you did.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's the real magic, where you go, I didn't see. It's why I always, like, as a director, I try to avoid giving direction before hearing someone's first take on it, because what did you think that meant, and what did you think it was about, and how did it and as someone who used to spend a lot of time editing low budget movies, a competent actor doing poorly is 99% an actor who no one told them what the line meant. And not to say that, like, they're dumb, it's just subtext is subtext, and if you're not in the writer's head and the line is not well written, you don't know what the subtext is. I worked with an actor once who was he was not even remotely intellectual about the process. But all I had to say to him was, this is what you're thinking about. Like, literally, he would give me a lame take, and I would say, you're thinking about money. And he would go, oh, okay. And then the next take would be flawless because he was thinking about money, which is what the character was supposed to be thinking. You just literally have to, some actors, you don't have to do that to at all, and they bring their own subtext and they're great. But some actors, you just literally have to say, this is about that. And they go, oh, okay, great. I mean, I find that especially young, inexperienced actors are a very earnest bunch, and writers are a very cynical bunch. And there's a tendency to read sarcasm on the page and reproduce it earnestly. And I saw that a lot in low budget movies, and I'd be like, no, that's meant to be irony. Try, a little sarcasm. Just bring me a little sarcasm in there. But you learn a lot about humanity making low budget movies.
I'm sure.
And
too bad they don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well,
God, yeah.
There is that. But we do have our Kickstarters, and I backed your Goblins show. I have my Goblins plastic figure.
Oh, nice.
I don't know, of all of the, like, I don't want magnets. I don't know that I want a patch for my jean jacket that I don't own, so I don't know why I chose the, 1.5 inch tall plastic figurine. I don't play D&D particularly, but I was like, I'll take.
You're about the only one.
I'll take the Goblins. I'll take the Goblins. Yeah, I played. I mean, it's such a classic thing. I played D&D in junior high, and then I started dating girls, And
there the twain shall meet.
And it's not that, and, you know, it's a way in which the world has changed so much for the better. I can't even speak about it, but women were always interested. Girls were always interested in science fiction and comic books and horror movies and all that thing. But men chased them out of conventions and comic book shops and gate kept the hell out of them. I can think of a dozen girls I went to high school with who probably would have loved to have been invited to a Dungeons and Dragons game, but nobody invited them to a Dungeons and Dragons game. Right. And the way in which I walk around Comic-Con now, and it's easily 50-50 right. Gender-wise, and I look at the young nerds and I'm like, you fuckers have no idea how good you have it. like I went to comic book conventions in the 70s and the early 80s, and there were, you know, there was nobody there that I wanted to talk to. You know? Right.
If there was a woman there, it was probably a paramedic because some overweight guy fell down the stairs.
Here's a joke that I told for 20 years, and then someone actually told me the true story in my joke, and I went, oh, holy shit, that's correct. I used to say that in the 70s and early 80s, there were two women at a comic book convention, the one dressed as Red Sonja and the one who wasn't. And I said that to an old grizzled pro once, and he said, and that woman was Wendy Pinney. And I went, oh, holy shit, you're right. It was Wendy Pinney in the Red Sonja costume at every convention when I was a kid. That's absolutely Wendy Pinney, for those who don't know, is the amazing co-creator of ElfQuest, legendary figure in the comic book world. But someone said that to me, and I was like, you're right. I am absolutely thinking of Wendy Pinney, who was always at those things. But to again, another complete boilerplate question, but I think it's always interesting. Susan, what was your first voiceover job, and how did you get into, like, had you thought about it before you were offered one? Were you actively seeking it? What was the first gig?
Well, the first gig was working for my dad. I was a teenager, and I used to do the ads for my dad's business in Rhode Island. My sister would write the copy for his store, and I would be on the radio with him. There was a weekly radio program, and he would go in and you'd talk about current events in the city and other things. And then during the commercial break, I would read the ad copy.
Okay, so I have to know what the business was.
It was a department store.
Wow.
What was the name?
Was it Eisenberg's?
Yeah.
Originally, it was Eisenberg and Ticton. It was originally that was my great-grandfather. And then by the time my father took it over, it was called Rathbun Outlet because it had been on Rathbun Street in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. So that's, I think at a really young age, I knew that there was something that
was a gig
with the voice that was a gig. And so that was like my first experience with it. And then
did he ever ask you back to do, like, let's do a commercial Wonder Woman for Rathbun's?
No, by then I think by the time Wonder Woman rolled around, he was retired. I think so. No, and so that was my first official one. I'd have to really think about where, like, the second gig came along, but it was many years later. So, yeah.
And Phil, quick answer to that question. Do you have one? What got
I do, actually. My very first voiceover gig was actually my first professional acting job. Weirdly, in junior high. In high school. Junior year of high school. I got cast on an NBC Saturday morning cartoon called the Mr. T cartoon. Awesome. It was not good. It was a cash grab. They had already that's the one. They had already done serials and apparently buses. So somebody said, "Hey, we left some money on the table. Do a cartoon."
Yes. I pity the fool who has not fully exploited this franchise.
Right. Mr. T was coaching a gymnastics team, and they
that traveled around solving mysteries.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Because in the 70s, people don't realize this. Police work in the 70s was mostly handled by teenagers. So very, very common Well, especially long-term cold case investigations were mostly teenagers and small children.
You had the Scooby Gang. You had Mr.
Nancy
T.
Drew.
And, yeah.
Yeah, my dad wrote Partridge Family novels, and they mostly were solving crimes.
Like you do when you're a musical family.
There's one of those books is called Keith the Spy, which I'm pretty sure has the Partridges involved in international espionage.
God, I'm so sad I missed that. I'm going to have to do a deep dive for that because, I am a Keith Partridge fan.
Oh, really?
Oh, gosh.
eBay.
Who wasn't?
My dad.
If you're my age, you're pretty much a Keith Partridge fan.
Yeah, generationally, it's either with my dad's writing, it's either the Partridge Family tie-ins or the Man from U.N.C.L.E. He wrote a Man from U.N.C.L.E. book and 2 Girl from U.N.C.L.E. books, and he wrote the Beneath the Planet of the Apes novelization. And that was the generationally, that's the thing you ordered from Scholastic if you're over an age that we will not say out loud during the
ordering from Scholastic. We've already dated ourselves.
We're ready, exactly.
But in class, speaking of classic 1970s formats, Phil has a plane to catch on the talk show, so he's going to jump off the couch.
Yes,
but Phil, tell the kids guys where can we find you and what are you up to?
I am doing voiceover from my house. It's my booth right there. And I'm at Phil Lamarr. 2 L's in the middle, 2 R's on the end.
Nice.
Instagram, Twitter, whatever.
Just to end things on a super uncomfortable note, I have to tell you that we've been watching our way through Clone Wars, and my wife turns to me and says, Kit Fisto is hot. I'm sorry. Kit Fisto is the sexiest squid man in the world. I was like, I'm going to have to tell Phil that. And she was like, he
is the only shirtless Jedi.
Right. I think we should work on a project called The Shirtless Jedi. I think we'd sell a lot there. Thank you for joining us, Phil.
No, thank you guys for having me. Susan, it's so good to see you.
Bye, Phil.
All right. Good. Take care, Rylend. Take care, David.
Take it easy, man.
But we'll go. Where can the people find you, Susan, before we move on to
Susan Eisenberg 1 on Instagram and Twitter because Susan Eisenberg was taken.
Right.
So I went with I don't know. I don't know. So I had to go to Susan Eisenberg 1. I didn't do the real Susan Eisenberg stuff because I think that seems a little, puff.
Yeah.
So I just went with Susan Eisenberg 1 because there are other real Susan Eisenbergs out there.
They are. But you
didn't want to throw
what
fake shit in them.
I always say that during, one of the nice things for all that I suffered for having an unusual name as a kid, in the Google age, having a pretty singular name is actually pretty good. Because if you Google David Avallone, it's me for 8 pages before you get. Seems like a very nice man, Lieutenant David Avallone. I believe he's a lawyer now after he got out of the Army. But it takes a few pages of Google before you get to him, which is nice. What have you got? What are you working on currently?
Auditioning currently. I mean, everything is about auditioning, which is, we're very lucky, as voiceover actors that we didn't skip a beat with COVID because all you had to do was figure out how to record from home and you could do it. I mean, it was a learning curve and it's, but I'm glad I learned it because
you were not one of those people like Phil who already had the booth set up or anything like that.
No, because actually my agent's office was 3 blocks from my house. So I would just go there every day to audition. And then if I booked something, I would go to a studio. So no, I never had a booth. And then this happened. And of course I needed to get it worked out rather quickly. And it was a learning curve. I mean, it still is. Sure. I'm still learning things because, you have to be your own engineer.
Yeah.
And so it's, that's another piece to that. And like I say, I like having a different skill set now.
Mm-hmm.
But it does add a different dimension to it. And sometimes you just directing yourself for auditions as opposed to having a booth director. That's also challenging because you just sort of like, oh, let it go already. Send, press send, you stop editing, just send it already. So that's that, but lucky. So auditioning a lot. And, I just finished Masters of the Universe with Kevin Smith.
Nice.
So that'll be coming out. They haven't for Netflix, and they haven't announced when it will be arriving, but I know it's really soon, because we finished our first season of it. So
And was that 22 or 10 or 13 or what? How big a season?
You know what? I don't know, because I wasn't in every episode, so I don't know how many episodes there were. But I voiced the sorceress in it, and I'd never worked with Kevin because really, I mean, but I met him in a green room at one of the conventions, and I just went up and introduced myself, and lo and behold, he knew who I was, which was lovely. Wow. And I got the part like a few months later. So, and it's been glorious. The other thing I'm doing, and it's like all consuming, is I have this other life where I love daytime television. I love my soap operas. And a woman I met who also loves her soap operas and has a podcast, and she invited me to be on her podcast a couple of times, and we got to talking. We decided to put together a Comic-Con for soaps.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Huge undertaking.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it's called SoapCon Live, and our first event is May 1st. And if you have any soap fans out there, I don't find a lot of crossover with my fan base. Not a lot of people who follow me are into daytime television, but if anyone who follows you is, or follows either one of you, they can go to soapconlive.com and see. We have General Hospital and As the World Turns and One Life to Live and The Doctors. We have a bunch of panels, and you can do meet and greets with your favorite soap stars and autographs and all that good stuff. So
do you know if
let me do a little plug.
Do you know if The Doctors has any? How long has that been running? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Well, it's gone. I mean, it hasn't been on for decades, but it's being televised on Retro TV. And Retro TV is one of our sponsors.
Oh, nice.
So we're doing a panel with them, with some of the four of the actors who were on The Doctors.
Well, now I know a present I can give you the next time I see you. My dad wrote a tie-in for The Doctors in the 60s. Wow. And here is the hilarious part. How do you do a novel for a sitcom when you've got all of that intricate continuity of story going on all the time? How do you dip into a serial? And his answer was essentially the novel is lost. All of the main characters from the sitcom The Doctors get on a plane to go to a medical conference in Japan, and the plane crashes. The plane crashes on an island in the Pacific, and that's the book.
Really well.
But it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of times, it's not like the writing teams were the same or the executive producers were the same. There was a lot of turnover. Sure. And so people would come in and just get rid of characters that they didn't like, or they would create stories. And so there were all these different periods in time where so-and-so was leading the show, and so-and-so was, that writing team was doing it. And because I'm such a nostalgic person, I really miss my shows that were are off the air now. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to do this, because I'm so nostalgic. I know there are other people out there who miss those shows. And, we're doing both. We're doing shows of yesteryear and also shows that are current. So again, if you have any daytimers out there.
How many are still on the air? Because I know that many. Yeah.
Only 4.
I knew that the industry was, had taken hits from the Oprah of it all and the Ellen of it all, and that as a storytelling medium was pretty much hanging on by its fingernails in the modern world.
It was, and unfortunately, we lost all the New York shows, and that's a shame, because so many of the actors who worked on Broadway worked on daytime television, especially if you go back a few decades, but even up until a decade ago. So you could make money on daytime, and then you could go do theater, and if that was your first love. And so the talent pool was extraordinary. People, it's like cartoons, people like whatever cartoons or whatever comic books. And it's like, no, don't downplay them. There's brilliance there. And there was brilliance and is brilliance in daytime television also.
Oh,
but
yeah,
unfortunately, all those jobs went away, which is a shame for not just the actors, but
the
crew.
No, and so many great actors have come from soap opera and are still in soap opera. One of my favorite leading men of the 60s who never really had a leading man movie career beyond a couple of movies is Eric Braeden. And hasn't he been on General Hospital for like 40 years now, 50 years?
No, he's on Young and the Restless.
Or Young and the Restless, sorry, yeah. But for
Victor Newman.
But for literally half a century.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, he just had an anniversary. He just celebrated, and I think it was 40. But yeah, I mean, one of my closest friends is Kin Shriner, who plays Scotty Baldwin on General Hospital, and he was also the Green Arrow in Justice League Unlimited. Oh. And yeah, and that's how we know each other, because anyway. And he, I think, just celebrated 44 years. So
there's something, anytime you can have a job in the arts where you are steadily employed for decades, my hat is off to you. I always say that about Marty and Elaine playing at the Dresden Room. It's like they're jazz musicians who have had a steady gig for 30 years. That is unheard of in this world. No one has a job in the arts that lasts decades upon decades, but they're beloved and people come to see them, and it's the same. Like I said, it's the same. No one has wanted Eric Braeden off that show, since the 70s, because he's great. He's a terrific actor,
and he doesn't want off the show. I mean, he said in a recent interview he's not going to retire. He will do it until he can't do it anymore. I mean,
carry him out of the studio feet first when the time comes.
Exactly. So that's
it's the same thing with Jerry Orbach doing Law and Order after, his career in film and his career on Broadway and being an incredible actor and all of that. And he's like, now I, wear the same sport coat, say a couple of cynical lines, and I'm done for the week. How fantastic is that?
Good gig. Yeah, a lot easier than daytime, but good gig.
Oh, totally. Totally. No, daytime is that incredible grind, and you have no time to learn your dialogue and
no rehearsals. Tape rehearsal. I mean, it's grueling. So much dialogue, so many scenes. I think that's another thing that, daytime actors are so undervalued, but they're the best in the business because they have to work harder than I mean, film actors are extraordinary, but their workload is very light compared to somebody who's working a daytime show that they run 52 weeks a year. So it's totally different. It's totally different. Very under represented, and so we're trying to change a little of that if we can. And if there are any fans out there who are yours and also of daytime, come visit our site.
The influence of soap opera on comic books cannot be underestimated. Also, there's that. I mean, whatever you say about Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men, that's as soapy as anything anyone has ever written, and it is a deeply beloved. And, I read a recent DC comic yesterday, a couple of days ago, and the degree to which there's a part of my mind that was like, wow, we're still this is still the same continuity from when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s. Like, they're still talking about events I remember in comic books from the 80s. And of course, the joke is because of the wackiness of how comic books work, they're talking about them like they were last week. I'm like, no, that was in a comic from 40 years ago. And you're just kind of pretending time it's like Bart Simpson being 9 for 30 years. It's like, you're kind of pretending time has not passed. But in
some ways it doesn't. That's what I love. It's like, it's sweet, right? It's sweet.
Yeah. Absolutely. No. And and let you be Wonder Woman, till the end of time,
thank you. That I have no control over.
Of course.
None. And, obviously I think that, I think the most dangerous thing you can do with playing a character like Wonder Woman is to feel ownership of the character. And I've said this before, it's hard not to when you've done it a lot, but for your own mental health, you have to let go of it because you have no control. And chances are they are going to use many other women. And whether you agree with that idea of going outside something that people already know and think it's a great idea, or you don't think it's a great idea, you have no say in the matter whatsoever. My only beef is that they haven't reunited us for that Justice League reunion. So
Sure.
I'm still hoping that's going to happen at some point.
Sure. Well, what's in your favor is, you've always got that thing of the next generation of writers and directors are the ones who were small children, when you premiered, you know what I mean? Like, that's the
funny.
bad thing about executives being young and not knowing anything about history. But there's also the good thing about, like, eventually the kid who was 5 is running the studio and loved the Justice League is running the studio. And, and look, that's why we got Linda Carter in the last Wonder Woman movie. Like, someone eventually comes along who has the respect and says, no, man, we got to put Linda Carter in these movies. Come on.
Yeah, no, Patty, I mean, listen, I think Patty adores and reveres Linda Carter as Wonder Woman and pays so much respect to her. Ironically, when you just said that, I did a movie, The Justice League versus the Fatal Five, and Eric Carrasco wrote it, and he grew up on the Justice League.
Right.
And so when they were doing casting, he was like giddy. And I remember meeting him for the first time, and I thought, it was like when I met Lauren Bacall. It was just like crazy. And how sweet is that? I mean, that's just, you're right. Absolutely. That younger generation whose parents turned them on to it, they're now, running shows and writing scripts, and lucky us that we get to be a part of it still.
And regardless of all of that, your contributions, particularly as Wonder Woman, but even everything else you've done, like, that doesn't go away. And that's the one of the great things about the streaming future and us all having the Library of Alexandria on our TVs and on our phones is that, like, someone who has never heard your voice turned on a TV today, went to HBO Max and started watching Justice League. Like, that happened today. Possibly.
So.
No, but it's inevitable because we all do it. There's stuff like I missed Brave and Bold, speaking about Diedrich, the first time it was on. And I saw it was on HBO Max. I was like, oh, yay, I get to catch up with this. And that's a great show.
For sure.
A lot of terrific voice work on it and all that. So, that is the real joy, is that nothing is, aside from algorithms and bad advice, nothing is stopping anyone from discovering any great thing.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
That's really the beauty of it. And as
speaking of discovering great things, we keep talking about Linda Carter. Have either of you seen her cabaret show?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
You have seen it. You've seen it.
A couple of times, yeah.
How amazing is it? Because people keep telling me that I need to see it. I mean, obviously, like, the last year is not, but she was in LA, like, kind of before the shit hit the fan.
I'm going to blank on the club, but it's quite a famous club out here, and it's really like the perfect space. It's like that old-fashioned dinner club where you go in and you have a meal and you watch her, and it was just so fun. And that's her first love. Music is her first love. Yeah. So that comes through with every note. But yeah, no, I think I've seen her perform twice now. And
lucky.
If you haven't seen her, you should. You definitely.
I will keep an eye out for it if she's doing shows in Los Angeles. I know she was doing shows in Vegas for a while too. I feel like she did.
And she does perform, like, oftentimes when she'll do a con or something like that, she'll perform as well locally. So, I don't know now with her husband passing and, so tragically, I don't know, where she is with performing, but she'll be back. If she's not there now,
I'd be surprised if she doesn't keep going with it.
She will.
Because she's such a natural at it.
She is. And, totally.
Yeah, because I was maybe 13 or 14 when that show premiered, which is about the age I was when Superman the movie came out. It's around the same time, and You know, I was not particularly a superhero comic book reader as a kid, and partially because it was that soap opera thing of jumping into a moving train, the moving train of that continuity. You can, you know, like I said, I just read a DC comic last week, and I was like, I pay attention, and even I'm like, this is gibberish. I don't, what is going on? Who are these people?
Well, can you imagine what it's like for somebody who's not in that world and trying to, like, the origins and stories? And, you know, I get asked by fans quite a bit about things, and I'm just like, I've tried to educate myself, especially in a general way, so at least I can sound intelligent when people ask me questions. But it's a lot to learn. I mean, I don't know how you people keep it straight, frankly.
Oh, I don't. I mostly don't keep it straight.
It's crazy. But luckily, though, there are some really good videos on YouTube that help explain things. Yeah, so it's like if I ever get into like a conundrum of not knowing what is that referring to, and I'll just go look it up. You know, there's somebody out there who can explain it to me.
Nerdist makes some great morning after videos about the Marvel shows, going, here's all the references to stuff from comic books. And I watch them, and I get 50% of it, but the other 50% I'm like, whoa,
like,
I mean, one of the funnier things about that Harley Quinn show is there are a lot of outlandish characters in it, and I was shocked to read, you know, you read the trivia on IMDb, and it's like, wow, that's a real comic book character. That comically ridiculous idea was someone's real comic book character, and they mined it and put it in the show, and good for them, you know. But yeah, I think all of those things, my wife is a big nerd and a big fan of this stuff, but she didn't dive as deep into it as I do. And part of my job is to footnote while we're watching, you know.
That's cool.
You know,
cool. I wish I had somebody who could do that for me, frankly.
Watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier with her and pausing and going, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is playing someone who used to be Nick Fury's girlfriend. Right. Will that be relevant information going forward? Probably not, but it's pretty funny, you know.
I need that. I definitely need that. I might have to put you on speed dial.
Oh, please do. Please do.
Nerd
Sorry about the light. You know, I when I sat down, the light was in a certain place, and now it's moved, obviously. So I'm sorry I keep going in and out.
Oh, that's okay.
Lightness is dark. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we recorded one of these once in the winter, and it was sunset, and I have a light that comes on at like 5 when it gets dark, and it's a red light, and by the end of the show, I was like in darkness with this spooky red light on.
You looked like the devil. It was terrifying.
It was like, sorry guys, I forgot that it's winter and at 6 o'clock I'm gonna be sitting here in total dark. When we started at 5, the sun was out, but now it's
right, exactly.
Now it's jet black. Well, anyway, it has been lovely talking to you and Phil earlier. Thank you so much for doing this, Susan. It means a lot to me.
You're so welcome. And I wonder, is this now going to be a trend where you have the voice actors on, or you change it up with voice actors?
Do it again any time. It's it's something that I had wanted to do for a long time, and obviously, you know, Phil is my entranceway into that whole universe. He's how I met you, and I know other people that do that work, but you know, no one who works as much as you and Phil do, you know. Well,
and you know, there's so many out there. Like you mentioned a few that he's working with on his Goblins project.
Yeah.
You know,
I know Maurice in passing. I know Tom Kenny a bit. I know
Jen Hale is great.
I don't know him. I know a guy.
Jennifer.
Oh yeah. I don't know why I'm spacing on Pinky's name. It's one of the Ninja Turtles too.
Yes, I know.
I know the guy is a friend of mine, and I'm completely spacing on his name. Rob, Rob Paulson. Another great guy.
Great guy.
Yeah.
No. Sorry, Rob.
Because of working with Kevin Eastman, I know a lot of I know a higher than average number of Ninja Turtles.
Well, so then you can always have, like, you know, there's this whole community. So there's no my point is, gentlemen, there's no shortage of guests. So that's why, like, there's this whole huge community of people that can come on and tell you stories about the voiceover world.
I reached out to Cree Summers, an old friend of mine. Like, I've known her longer than I've known Phil, but I hadn't heard back from her before I heard from you. So, but
yeah, and I don't know her well at all. We have similar paths like that. I'll go to a studio and there she is.
Oh, sure.
And we have similar friends. We have friends in common, but my God, is she brilliant? I mean, she's brilliant. Yeah. What a talent. So book her if you can. She's great.
No, she's one of the very best. She has such an indelible voice. And, sadly, I think to a certain degree, the voiceover industry is so small that, like, I remember seeing the poster for Drawn Together and literally looking at her character and going, well, that's going to be Cree Summer, because who the hell else in the voiceover industry is going to do that part? Like she gets, and it's great that she works like mad.
She does, and she deserves to. I'll say that I think animation is small, and video games is even smaller, but commercial voiceover has it's exploded, and that's where it's gotten harder. And
also in commercial voiceover, you're getting big-footed by A-list movie stars.
In everything, you're getting big-footed because they're all doing series. I mean, check Netflix; it's all animated series, and they're all celebrities. So it's the commercial, and it's funny that you say that because it used to be that you were, they would say sound like Juliana Margulies or and it's not even that anymore. It's that it's just the doors swung wide open for voiceover, and now everybody throughout the world can audition. Yeah, and so it's become just this huge. It's like winning the lottery, frankly, in that regard. But you just keep buying your ticket and hoping for the best, right? Yeah, that's all we can do. Any of us.
It's literally like one of my superpowers. Watching TV with my wife, I'll go, "That's John Hamm." That's Susan Sarandon. That's I know who all of these. And there's something about it that's fun, like particularly John Hamm doing. I think it's Mercedes-Benz. I'm like, there's something creepy to me about Don Draper selling me a Mercedes. Like I don't know.
Who better to sell you a Mercedes than Don Draper? But it's always weird because I think people are entitled to make a living no matter how famous or not famous you are. Absolutely. But when you consider what they're paying that person, and there are just other people who could do it so brilliantly, but then you don't get to meet John Hamm. If you're going with somebody else, you don't get to have John Hamm in the studio with you, and who doesn't want to meet John Hamm?
I don't. The Instagram photo. That's the key.
Right.
This is about all acting, not just voiceover. Particularly, I don't know if I have the history right, but in my mind, John Cleese is part of the problem. Is the originator of the problem. I remember he did a guest spot on on Frasier that everybody loved, and he won an Emmy for it.
Interesting.
And I remember when I was a kid growing up, guest stars in TV shows, that was the Emmy that went to the actor that you didn't know the name of, that you hadn't heard of.
That's so true.
And John Cleese getting that episode and being a sensation. Like, I feel like from then on in, it was like, can we get Brad Pitt on Friends? Can we get...
You're right.
And like I said, he may not be the Rosetta Stone. I may have the timeline.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down. John Cleese.
But I feel like it was John Cleese winning the Emmy for Frasier.
You're right.
That was like, we should stunt cast instead of it being James Caron, instead of it being, Bill Smitrovich, instead of it being... beloved character actor that everybody adores, getting the Emmy for best guest star. Now it's like, Bruce Willis does a Will and Grace, and we got to give a friggin' Emmy to Bruce Willis now. Like it. And again, you're right. Everyone deserves to earn a living, but there's just a part of me that's going, "Come on, man, let other people be on sitcoms."
Except, like, people say that all the time. Like, "Oh, geez. She doesn't need the money, or he doesn't need the money. They've got gigs." But I think with every actor, no matter if you're Bruce Willis or you're Bruce Stevens, right, you never know where your next gig is coming. Oh, totally. And so that, you just pile away. If you can pile away the cash while you can, be my guest,
I said, I have a hard time begrudging any. It it comes up a lot in our discussions about Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is such a valid means for people who don't have means to get their stuff made.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if you know, Keanu Reeves did one and raised millions of dollars.
Yes, I heard. Yes, I heard.
$2.2 million. Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, fuck that guy. But
you,
particularly for something with like Kickstarter, the big barrier to Kickstarter projects getting seen and made is the number of people who use Kickstarter. And I guarantee you that Keanu Reeves encouraged 1 million people who had never been to Kickstarter before to have to set up a Kickstarter profile.
Yeah.
So now those people are potential customers for people like me and Rylend and Phil Lamarr doing Goblins. So it's I can't get too mad at it.
Right.
You know? And Rylend's heard me say this 1,000 times, but I always use the example that if crowdfunding had existed in the 70s, Orson Welles would have made 5 more movies than he ever got to make.
You're right. You're right.
Because
100%.
as people think, like, you know, there are studio executives who have said no to Steven Spielberg in the last 30 years. We don't believe that that's true, but it is in fact true. Even whoever you think is the most powerful person in the world, someone who envies their power sitting in a meeting has the power to say no to them, and has the most thrilling moment in their life is them rejecting Steven Spielberg's pitch. More thrilling than making a movie with Steven Spielberg is going, I don't know, Steven, I don't think that's going to fly. You know, and that's wild to think about.
And I just got to say, you know, I mean, when I was a kid and I saw that commercial, you know, and I saw that Mr. T was going to be on Different Strokes, I was all in. I would not watch Different Strokes, you know, daily or anything, but if Mr. T was going to be on,
you were watching.
I was all in. And so if John Cleese is going to be on Frasier, you know,
there you go.
I think it works that same way. Yeah.
I get it, and I love the stunt casting myself. I always love. I have a particular fascination with casting because
me too.
To me, there's so much storytelling in it. There's so much of I'm telling you about the character. My favorite example is I was watching an episode of 24, and I hadn't watched the opening credits closely, so I didn't know who the guest stars were. And there's a scene where Kiefer is in a car with someone, and they're going to see the man who taught me how to be a secret agent, the most impressive, amazing secret agent in the world. And I think I turned to my wife and said, I need a James Bond or better when we get to this location. Like, this cannot be the best Canadian under fiver they could find. This has got to be like someone amazing. And it was Peter Weller. And I went, you know what? A RoboCop is acceptable in this.
Well done.
Buckaroo Banzai. Like, but when you build up a character like that, and then the door opens and it's not Peter Weller, you go, I don't believe any of what you just told me. You know, what you just told me about this character. It's like movies where the president of the United States, in order to keep it anonymous, is played by some character actor you've literally never seen before. I always don't like that, because in the world of the movie, everyone knows what the president looks like, and he's a familiar face to them. So if you cut to the White House and the guy sitting behind the desk is not a familiar face, I go, he's not the president, because I've never seen that guy before in my life. And there's no point in history where you cut to the Oval Office and I don't know what the president of the United States looks like.
You know, I just thought of an idea for a podcast, because seriously, we could talk about this forever. But someone should do a casting podcast. You know, talk about casting choices, if it had gone this way instead of this way. You know, when you read the books now, like the new Mike Nichols book by Mark Harris, you know, he talks about like who was cast in this role and then they fired him, and, you know, like Gene Hackman in The Graduate, and that he was fired. You know, stuff like that is so intriguing, and it can really just, you know, I could talk about it for hours, but alas, I cannot, because I must return a call to my dad, who has called about 3 times.
Well,
and he's ready to do that with me.
We will, but you don't have a dad. You were formed from dust.
That's true.
Well, give the retired department store king our love.
I will, indeed.
Excellent.
And thank you. And what projects are you guys working? I know what project you are working on, because you said it. But what are you working on, David?
That's what we get to next. Rylend first. Why don't you tell us what you're up to?
You can find me at Rylend Grant on all forms of social media. It's RYLENDGRANT. I always spell it for the people who are listening because it's not a real name. My parents drunkenly arranged letters, and now I have to spell it for you. Oh. You can find my books, the Ringo Award-winning Aberrant, and the Ringo Award-nominated Banjax in fine comic shops everywhere and via Amazon and Comixology and all that noise. My books, The Jump and Peacekeepers, are available now via BackerKit. If you go to backerkit.com/The Jump or /The Peacekeepers, all one word, you'll find all that stuff. But yeah, I actually have a new book hitting comic shops in August, but not being announced until early June. So soon.
Yeah,
soon.
That's always like, I don't know, we have the NDAs where you ask what I'm working on now, and there are these two, games that are big, and I can't talk about either one. So I'll have to come back when I get to
That'd be great. Yeah, all roads can fork off of davidavallonefreelance.com. I do this podcast. I do a podcast called Pulp Today, where I read classic novels that I love and talk about them a bit. I have guests on, Susan, if you ever want to come on and read from your favorite book and talk about it. And I define pulp very broadly, and I think accurately. The name literally refers to the cheapness of the paper it is printed on. So essentially,
have you ever had Alex Segura on?
I have not. Alex has been on this show, though.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have had Alex on this show.
Yeah, okay, because he it seems like he'd be perfect for something like that.
Would. That's actually a good. I just had a British actress on named Susie Kane. To talk about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I
had to talk about that with someone British. I couldn't not. It was my 42nd episode, so I had to talk about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on my 42nd.
And when in doubt, have a Brit on. They sound so good. Well, I mean, who cares? Who cares, right? It's just like if it sounds that good, people are going to listen. It's just Yeah. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So
no, that's okay.
My next podcast.
Comics project will be Elvira meets Vincent Price, which is coming sometime in the summer. Okay. And everything else is also an NDA and a secret. But it's exciting stuff. Thank you once again, Susan, for being on the show.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
And thanks, everybody, for watching and listening.
Thanks,
we'll catch you on the next exciting episode.
If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other fine purveyors of ear crack, please leave us a 5-star review. And wherever you're watching and or listening, subscribe. We'll see you back here next week for more madcap hijinks on the Writer's Block.